1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, that's good. Perfect. All right, yeah, we're live whenever you're ready.
Good to go?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Do we have music or anything?
I don't think so,
Okay, cool.
since there's no one able to run the board.
Yep, that makes sense. You can tell I know how all this works, right?
No, yeah, you know how it works for the most part. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the post-game spread live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill and presented by Hurrdat Sports. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Brandon Tiedemann. He's pulling double duty today with me, running the board and playing co-host. Brandon, we definitely appreciate that. We're coming to you after a win. First win of the season.
Feels good.
How you feeling?
It feels good. I think, it was a complete game for Nebraska.
Yeah, and listen, I know let's get the qualifiers out of the way first, right? Nebraska wins 35-11. Yes, it's Northern Illinois. Yes, it's not a Power 5 school. But there's a lot of positives to take away from this, right? First of all, much cleaner game in terms of the turnovers. You had the one early on the Heinrich Haarberg fumble, but it was a forced error, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like a drop snap or
a horrible read on a throw or anything like that. And listen, we're talking about incremental progress, right? Having unforced errors and like they did in the first two games is you're just beating yourself, right? At least on that play, Northern Illinois caused something, right? They beat the tackle on the play and got to Heinrich Haarberg and got the turnover, right? But then probably the highlight of the day was the defense, right? Forced, I believe, 10 punts in the game from Northern Illinois. They gave up nothing until the very, very end on a fumble inside the 10-yard line. They only gave up a field goal. Don't give up anything until the backups are in. They get a touchdown at the very end in garbage time. Another really, really encouraging performance from Tony White's defense.
The defense, like what I was saying before, the running back had a total of 16 yards.
On how many carries?
8.
8 carries, or 2 yards a carry. They couldn't have had more than, 20 yards rushing as a team?
Here,
I would say, do we have the stats up?
Yeah, I have the stats. Overall, they had 26 yards.
26 yards rushing as a team. So they were right at 100 yards total offense?
They had 123 yards receiving. So
basically 150 yards of total offense for the game. That's an incredible performance from Tony White's defense. Again, we saw them play really, really well against Minnesota. I thought they played really well at stretches against Colorado until kind of fatigue caught up with them a little bit. So that's going to be probably the biggest takeaway, right? As we see Tony White's defense continue to perform well.
Yeah, I think, I've always said that Nebraska's defense is what's going to make them be good in the Big Ten. Obviously the offense, they struggled first two games. And then with the quarterback switch, it felt like they were more of like a complete team to me watching the game today.
Yeah, absolutely. And the defense, we talked about this before the season. The defense was going to be ahead of the offense because we weren't really sure about the wide receiver room. We weren't really sure about the offensive line. We weren't really sure what Jeff Sims would be. Well, it was Heinrich Haarberg today, and who looked pretty good. We'll get to him in a minute. But we thought the defense was going to be the thing that led this team. If they made a bowl game, it was going to be on the backs of the defense, right? And the offense would have to do enough to figure it out along the way. And that's what we've seen so far. The defense has been, I think, better than even I expected or could have hoped for, right? And that carried over today in a really dominating performance against the Northern Illinois team that, say what you will about Boston College, they've beaten a Power 5 team this year, right? And that Power 5 team took the number 3 team in the country down to the wire today in Boston College. So, it's probably not that linear, but Northern Illinois is probably better than your run-of-the-mill Group of 5 school.
Yeah, they're better than what the spreadsheet says about them.
Right.
They're a tough team, and they knew that going into this game. Mm-hmm. That's why everyone knew like it's still going to be like a tough game for them to play. But they showed today that this is what they've been working in the offseason. This is what Matt Rhule's vision was a game like today, in my opinion.
Well, and frankly, if you're Nebraska, the wins aren't easy against anyone, right? I mean, you're talking about last year you lose to Georgia Southern. This year you start off 0-2. You can't take wins for granted at this point when you're building the program as Matt Rhule, right? You take whatever wins you can get. And for a while, it looked like it might be kind of a slog fest a little bit. It's 7-3 for a really long time. And then Nebraska finally kind of started to break them down a little bit with that 35-11 final. It was 35-3 until that last garbage time touchdown by Northern Illinois. But I kind of want to get to Heinrich Haarberg here because I'm looking at the comments on YouTube. Mason wants us to say his name. Mason, thank you for listening on the YouTube channel here. We appreciate you. They say go Big Red. Heinrich Haarberg is probably going to be the sexy headline from this game, right? Obviously you've got the defense, which is the thing that's been most portable from week to week for Nebraska. But Heinrich Haarberg coming in, a lot of QB run, did throw it 24 times. And listen, you're not going to be blown away by the throwing stats, right? 14 of 24, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. The most important number, though, 0 interceptions there. Now, he threw one very interceptable ball. He threw one over the middle, probably should have been picked off. But really looking at that game, and I'll have to watch back because, we're watching it live here. We don't get a chance to look at tape yet. Kind of feel like Matt Rhule here. Be like, we got to be careful talking about quarterbacks until I look at the tape, right? I thought that was the only really bad decision he made throwing the ball.
He looked really good today.
He looked comfortable.
He looked like he was meant to be out there. And I feel like everyone felt more comfortable with him out there. I don't really know what it was, but just that second half, he had his first half under his belt.
Mm-hmm.
He came out with some fire that second half.
Especially after that first fumble, right, where, I kind of think, I thought at least, hey, they came out and had that first drive, looked really capable on offense. Second drive, they have that fumble inside their own 10, and you're like, man, what is it with the quarterbacks and the turnovers and everything there? And then the rest of the game was pretty clean. You had that one throw that probably could have been picked. Besides that, though, not a lot of opportunities for turnovers or to create turnovers for Northern Illinois. He didn't light the world on fire. It is a group of 5 opponent, but I think a lot of it was just removing the anxiety that had started to build up with Jeff Sims, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in terms of who's going to be the starter moving forward, how healthy Jeff Sims is, because that's going to be probably the largest factor, let's be honest.
That is the factor.
Yeah, it is the factor. And, I've heard some speculation that maybe they think this is a 2-week injury and they try and get Jeff Sims ready for Michigan. I have no idea at this point, and I don't think we will know until we get to next week and then we get to Michigan, right? But at the very least, you feel okay with Heinrich Haarberg in there, right? This isn't one of those situations where you're like, you can't even put him out there.
No, like it was watching him play today. I was like, he even had 98 yards on 21 carries.
Yeah.
Like he did it all. He did what Jeff Sims did, but he kind of did it better today.
Yeah. So the big difference between Haarberg and Sims is probably the explosiveness in the running game, right? Sims can break those home run plays for you. Haarberg's long run was 20, right? Rather than, Sims had the 57-yarder last week. You're probably not getting a 60-yard touchdown run out of Heinrich Haarberg, I'd guess.
Yeah.
But if he can provide, listen, he's probably not going to run for 100 yards against everybody or 98, but if he can run 4.5 yards a carry, 4.7 today, and take care of the football, you feel okay with him in there. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens when Jeff Sims is healthy. But at the very least, you feel pretty good about this isn't an Andrew Bunch against Troy situation, right? Because I think some people were afraid of that. And it was because you don't know. You haven't seen, I think coming into the day, Heinrich Haarberg had 17 snaps at quarterback in his college career. Like that's not even a sample size. It's not a small sample size. It's not a sample size. Right?
It's really nothing. It's, you're in at garbage time.
Yeah, you're talking about garbage time. You're talking about like one-offs when somebody's helmet falls off or something. Like that is not, like that's barely a series, right? And so at the very least, you say, hey, we have a capable backup that we know he can do X, Y, and Z in terms of our playbook, and you feel pretty solid about that. And that, to me, is an additional win to the win in the actual win column, right? Like it's a win to know, hey, we've got a guy that we can feel capable with as a backup.
Yeah, and there's probably with the first win today, and then with his performance, there's a weight lifted off Husker fans' shoulders today.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I think there's value in competition too. Part of the thing that I think Nebraska quarterbacks have struggled with over the course of the last almost 12 years at this point, if you want to go Adrian Martinez, Tommy Armstrong, Taylor Martinez, is the fact that there hasn't really been a viable option as a backup quarterback to push that first guy. Think about all of the great quarterbacks in Nebraska history, right? Eric Crouch was pushed by Bobby Newcomb, right? Tommy Frazier and Brooke Behringer. Like you had these guys that were pushing the starters the entire time. Like Tommy Frazier was coming off of a injury into 95, and it was a real battle whether him or Brooke Behringer was going to start at quarterback. I know I'm going before your time here because I'm an old head, right? But how old are you, by the way?
I'm 21.
Okay, I feel terrific now.
I'm a youngin. I'm a youngin in the business.
No, you're good. You're good. So you've got these guys that one of the consistent, and it's not just a quarterback, right? At a lot of the positions, you get better out of guys when there's competition in the room. And that's a thing that has not happened at quarterback in Nebraska in a really long time. And even if Jeff Sims is the guy, I'm fine with that. But this pushes him, and it gives you an option if he isn't doing what he needs to.
Yeah, because if there's a game like, looking forward to Michigan, it's going to be a tough game. And if one guy isn't playing well, then you have the other guy can swap out and he can play. It's, maybe you can do some certain plays that Haarberg can run better than Sims. And you can switch them out even for simple things like that.
Well, and I think the quarterback run game here, I think, is really important because Sims had 19 carries in week 1. Haarberg has 21 carries here against Northern Illinois. To me, that's a big deal because there's a little bit of comfort there in leaning on quarterback run if hey, the backup's okay too. Like if Jeff Sims gets a little dinged up, you aren't going to be afraid to run him because, hey, we can throw Heinrich out there. We feel okay about that, right? And maybe they feel okay about Chubba too. I don't know. We haven't seen too much of him yet, but Matt Rhule's been consistent. Hey, we think we can win with Chubba. We think we can win with Heinrich. Well, they were right about winning with Heinrich, right? So maybe they're right about Chubba as well. That only makes everybody on the team better, especially in that quarterback room.
Yeah, you have, the guys are there. You're supposed to next man up. And if you have everyone in there working at the same goal and that guy pushing you, your job's never safe. We saw that with the running back position last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I'm glad you brought up running backs. We did see Anthony Grant today after he was completely shelved in week 2. He had 7 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown at the very end there. This is an interesting situation with Anthony Grant because I do think he's the best running back. I think he is their most talented natural runner. And it's really important that he has worked his way back into at least getting snaps on offense and earned that trust back because they're going to need him. Even if Irvin ends up being the guy as he was today, 14 carries, 67 yards, you're going to need Anthony Grant. You can't give Gabe Irvin every carry. Ramir Johnson was in street clothes, at least in the second half. He didn't get any carries. You need that from Anthony Grant. So for him to get back out there, I thought was really important.
Yeah, and that's going forward. Now they have more options. I think this team for Nebraska, they have options all around the board where they even split receiving today. Like that was split between 3 or 4 guys. They have options.
Yeah, you mentioned the receiving. Thomas Fidone, kind of his breakout game, a little bit, 4 receptions, 42 yards. Haarberg seemed really comfortable targeting him. He had the touchdown as well. Started looking like maybe the prospect that we saw Thomas Fidone is starting to translate onto the field for Nebraska. If that's the case, that's going to be really big, regardless of who's playing quarterback.
Yeah, he looked really good today. It was good to see him out there. He looked really good today.
He looked good. Marcus Washington broke free a couple times, although he looked like he got a little banged up. Hopefully we'll get more information on that later. Billy Kemp had 3 receptions for 13 yards, but did have a touchdown. Had a drop that was not great for him, but other than that, you had what is it, 7 or 8 different guys with a reception on those 14 completions, so really spread it around quite a bit. Alex Bullock had a long one for 33 yards that you like to see as well, and something that Nebraska fans haven't seen in a really long time, a really well executed screenplay in the first half.
Yeah.
It was, and listen, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but that's been something for whatever reason, whether it's the offensive line play, whether it's the quarterback's ability to throw that specific pass, is a big part of normal offenses that Nebraska hasn't really had at their disposal for the last handful of years. That could be big moving forward, especially, the offensive line I still think is a work in progress, especially in pass protection. That's one of the big areas you can use is the screen game to kind of mitigate and slow down some of that pass rush.
Yeah, if you open up your screen game, it opens up a lot of things you can do on offense too.
And I really like the fact, I don't think they hit on any of them. Billy Kemp dropped a long pass, but they were taking shots down the field as well. Those are kind of the two things that, in addition to establishing the run game, can loosen things up a little bit for the quarterback. I liked that they took the shots. Even though they didn't hit them, even the threat of it stretches the defense out a little bit because they're not just going to let guys run free behind them ever, right? No, that's not something any defense is trying to do, right? And so even having the threat of, we're going to take our shots. And if you're not there, we're going to keep taking our shots. And I thought, honestly, just taking those shots, even though they didn't connect on any of them, the longest reception was 33 yards on Alex Bullock's catch and run. I think that ball probably went 10, 12 yards in the air. That to me is a really important part of this offense that we hadn't seen as much of in the first couple weeks.
Yeah, they showed the offense is what we wanted, is what they showed today. They show that we can do a lot of different things with a lot of different people. And that's what they were showing, with the long balls. They didn't connect today, but when they do start to connect, then that opens up the playbook even more.
Yeah, and we saw, again, Nebraska top 200 yards rushing, 44 attempts rushing for 224 yards. That's, again, good for over 5 yards a carry. They've been in that neighborhood kind of for about 40 rush attempts, over 200 yards every game so far this year. If they can continue that, listen, they've done it against 2 Power 5 opponents. Now they've done it against a Group of 5 opponent as well. If they can continue doing that throughout the season, that's going to be a recipe to win ball games for them, especially if they can come out at least even in the turnover margin. Then being able to consistently run 200 plus yards a game, 4 or 5 yards a pop, that's going to lead to wins in the Big Ten West. It just is, because that's the type of football that gets played out there, right? I mean, who in the Big Ten West have you seen that looks like a world beater so far?
No one.
Nobody. I mean,
Big
Wisconsin
Ten West is not good this year.
It's a dumpster fire, right? We thought Wisconsin was going to be good. And listen, I understand they haven't lost yet, but they struggled with Buffalo in week 1. They struggled for quite a while with Georgia Southern today. I don't think they're lighting the world on fire at all. Iowa's still Iowa, right? They're solid, but unspectacular. That's the Iowa MO. Minnesota, we've already seen. Nebraska, if they take care of the football, beats Minnesota, right? And that's your top 3 in the West, I think, right? I mean, Illinois is going to be who they are, but it looks like they take maybe a little bit of a step back this year from where they were last year. I mean, Nebraska's right in that pack in terms of quality of football, I think.
Yeah, they're right there. And the next thing they need to is just 1-score games. That's the next thing that, you're brick by brick is what we're doing. Today we showed the offense. Next is you have to close, the short games, you have to close them.
Yeah, and hopefully that's not next week, right?
It's not next week, no.
They've got Louisiana Tech coming back to Lincoln again. And hopefully you're not looking at those 1-score games until after you get back into conference play, right? You want to take care of business comfortably against Louisiana Tech. You've shown that you're capable of that against Northern Illinois. And hopefully by then you've started to figure some more things out. Mark on the YouTube page says number 10 is QB1. I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if we can go there quite yet, but I do feel really good about the way Haarberg played today. Rhule, so Sam McEwen from the Omaha World Herald is at the press conference right now. Rhule was asked if Haarberg's made it a QB competition. Rhule says he won't talk about hypotheticals and says Nebraska has found out it can win with 2 QBs. To me, that sounds like it's a competition.
Good.
I don't want to parse words. I don't want to do anything like that.
I don't want to twist anything.
But number one, nothing matters until Jeff Sims is healthy. We don't know anything until Jeff Sims is healthy, right? Number 2, then you kind of figure out, okay, where are these guys at? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Because let's be clear, I do think Jeff Sims' ceiling is higher.
Yes.
Like his ceiling as a quarterback is higher. The explosive plays are there. He probably has better natural arm talent, definitely faster, more explosive in the QB run game, but 6 turnovers in 2 games.
Yeah.
Right. Like and listen, he hasn't got to play a group of 5 opponent yet. So I fully am aware of that, but 6 turnovers in 2 games, right? Heinrich Haarberg, not as explosive, much more solid, steady. 1 turnover that I don't think you can pin on him.
No.
Right. It goes down on him. I get it, but not his fault. That's going to be really interesting to see once Jeff Sims is healthy, how they handle that.
That's what everyone's going to talk about for the next 2 weeks is who's going to be QB1.
So
which is fine. That's, as you should.
Well, and listen, people make it such a big deal about, oh, you can't play 2 quarterbacks. They go back to this old adage, oh, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. Well, guess what? I'm pretty sure Florida won a national title playing Chris Leak and Tim Tebow in 2006.
Yeah.
That was fine. And not to use another Florida example, but with a different coach, Steve Spurrier was literally rotating quarterbacks every other play. He would tell the quarterback a play, they'd run in, the other one would come out, he'd tell the next quarterback to play. Like they were switching every play. I think it was Doug Johnson and Jesse Palmer, who hosts like Good Morning America now. He really does. He was on The Bachelor at one point. He's had a weird life. But he's just like, is it ideal? No. You'd love to have one guy that you feel great about and you just run him out there. But maybe Nebraska's not in that situation. Maybe Heinrich Haarberg has a package of plays you feel really good about. So you make sure he gets 10, 12, 15 plays a game. And maybe Jeff Sims has a certain package of the playbook that you feel really good about. So Jeff Sims is maybe your starter still because he's got the higher ceiling. But having more capable people, in my mind, is always a benefit.
It's going to be a benefit because then you don't know what to expect week by week. They could throw you something different every week because you don't know who's going to play. You have 2 different quarterbacks with, like you said, they run a certain set of plays. Then, each week it's going to be different. You don't really know what's going to happen depending on your opponent.
Yeah, and even if they kind of had that plan for Heinrich Haarberg anyway. They had him, we saw him in week 1 as an H-back, right? They had talked about how they have a set of plays for him in kind of a QB run game, almost like a wildcat, but he's an actual quarterback situation. They talk all the time about how he's one of the top 5 athletes on the team. You want that guy on the field, right? You want a guy who's one of your best athletes on the team to get on the field. It's kind of the same thing Tony White's talked about on the defense, right? Is, hey, he wants to make things as simple as possible so guys can go out, and he calls it on the grass, and it kind of drives me a little crazy instead of on the field. I don't know why, but it's a little tick I have, I guess. But he said, he wants to get the guys out there so they can make plays on the field. Why should that be different on the offensive side of the ball, right? You want your guys, whether it's Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd, you want those guys to be able to have certain plays. They can go out and make plays on the field. If Heinrich Haarberg is one of the best athletes on the team, Heinrich Haarberg needs to be on the field in some form or fashion, right? Like I don't think that's rocket science.
Like you go back to 2 quarterbacks. K-State does that right now.
Yeah.
Where they have Will Howard and Avery Johnson, I think believes the name. Mm-hmm. They have different set of plays for each quarterback. And they rotate them out a couple times a series.
Yeah, based on situations, what they want to run, all sorts of stuff. This is not a novel thing. People do this. And I get that it's never really been successful at Nebraska, or really, I don't even think been tried at Nebraska to that extent, minus the Adrian Martinez, Luke McCaffrey thing that they dabbled with a little bit. But Luke McCaffrey's a wide receiver. Like, he's playing wide receiver at Rice. So,
yeah,
like, literally the only reason he came to Nebraska in the first place is because they're the only place that said he could try and play quarterback. The dude's not a quarterback, so it's a really different situation. It was much more of a wildcat situation with him. But this is not a novel idea. People do this at the quarterback position in college at a semi-regular amount. It just doesn't happen at Nebraska very often, and so people kind of freak out. But the more good players, like this, it sounds dumb to make it this simple, but the more good players you have, the better.
Yeah, that's how you win football games. Is the more good players you have, the better. That's a big part of it. Some people kind of forget that.
And Heinrich Haarberg is a good football player. Whatever that looks like, he ran 21 times for 98 yards. You would take that out of a running back tomorrow, right? Like, if you could sign up and say, hey, my running back can go 21 for 98 every week, absolutely. Sign me up, right? Well, that's what Heinrich Haarberg did tonight. You're not telling me you don't want that guy on the field, regardless of what it looks like? Absolutely. And you know how I know the coaching staff feels the same way? Because they played him at H-back in the first week of the season. Like, he is your number 2 quarterback, and they played him at H-back because they wanted to get him on the field. So I'll be really interested to see what this looks like moving forward. I do expect Jeff Sims to be healthy at some point. There's rumors out there that I don't know how much credence there is to him, but there's rumors that they felt like this was a 2-week injury as soon as it happened. That kind of mild high ankle sprain, which I don't even know if that's a thing, but that's what they're calling it. Pretty much most high ankle sprains I've ever seen are not mild, but
you never know.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Whatever the diagnosis is, then
I'm not a doctor. I mean, I did nail the Aaron Rodgers Achilles injury on Monday, but I'm not a doctor. Like, you don't know what they're seeing here, but the rumor that I had heard basically from the jump was it's a 2-week injury. So maybe I'm kind of operating under the assumption that we see Heinrich Haarberg again next week against Louisiana Tech, which I kind of like because he performed well. You want to see if he can duplicate it. But at the same time, you almost want a confidence builder for Jeff Sims in there as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Would you rather have Haarberg play again, or would you rather hope Sims is healthy and then work out those kinks against Louisiana Tech?
Right. Yeah. And that's why you play the smaller teams before conference play most time, right? Is so that you can get going a little bit. Jeff Sims didn't have that luxury. Like, I've been as critical of Jeff Sims as anybody, but he didn't have the luxury of starting off against an FCS team and a group of 5 team like a lot of these quarterbacks have. And a lot of them haven't looked that good against them either. Like we mentioned Wisconsin, Tanner Mordecai hasn't really lit the world on fire in a lot of these games. And it's not, it's not always as easy as it seems as, hey, we got this transfer quarterback. Let's plug him in. He fits great in the offense. Let's go. Yeah, sometimes there's some growing pains. Jeff Sims had his against 2 Power 5 teams right off the bat. That's a little bit different of a situation than most teams in the country have faced at this point. So, there's a part of me that really would like to see him get some warm-up game is the wrong term, but ease into things a little bit, because I don't know how I feel about just throwing him out there against Michigan, if that's the plan.
Get him more comfortable.
Yeah.
He's not really comfortable out there. Like, you can tell there's sometimes, like, the drop snaps, like he's nervous, which I completely
that's
understand.
A mental error, right? That's not a physical error. He knows how to catch the snap. That's a mental error. He wasn't comfortable.
Yeah, so you get him comfortable, play him next week if you can. Even say you just do first half, second half.
Sure.
Depending on the rate of the game.
Yeah.
Then you put them out there. He gets more comfortable with the offense, and then you go into Michigan, feeling a little bit better about who you have a quarterback.
Yeah, and to me, that would be ideal, right? Is if Jeff Sims is healthy enough to go, but you still play both guys. That, to me, would be the best case scenario against Louisiana Tech, is getting them both reps, continue to get some seasoning for Heinrich Haarberg, also get some level of comfort for Jeff Sims, because whether we like it or not, you're probably going to need both these guys before the season's over, right? If you're running a QB run heavy offense, you're probably going to need 2 guys.
Yes.
That's just how it is, right?
Getting hit a lot kind of takes a toll on your body.
Yeah, getting hit a lot, getting a little dinged up, whatever, right? Or, hey, maybe Jeff Sims has another incident, or maybe Heinrich Haarberg was, where he's just not super comfortable in where the game's going in any given moment. Like, you would have loved to know at halftime last week of Colorado that Heinrich Haarberg was a capable quarterback, right? Because then maybe you can take a minute and let Jeff Sims settle down, right? You can take a minute and say, hey, like, it's okay, like, calm down, like, refocus, get ready to go, and you give Heinrich Haarberg a couple series because you know what he's got. Now that's on the table, right? If that happens again, whether it happens with Heinrich, whether it happens with Jeff Sims, you've got that on the table now to say, okay, we've got a guy that we can put in there for a couple series and not feel like the sky is falling, right? And that probably wasn't the case last week. You didn't know. You see Heinrich Haarberg in practice, you feel maybe okay about it, but against live action, you don't know. And now you do. So there's definitely a positive there, regardless of what decision they make in that room.
Yeah, there's a lot of upside.
Absolutely.
And I think people need to realize that there's a lot of upside to both quarterbacks and everything that we saw today. There's so much that, like you said, we didn't have the luxury of playing Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech first. We had to flip it. We had to play Minnesota and then a tough Colorado team. So you have to take what happened with a grain of salt and not overreact as much as some people are.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's, like I said, it's an oversimplification, but the more good football players you have, the better. Like it's overly simplified, but it is absolutely the case. And Nebraska doesn't really have the luxury of being picky at which positions they have good football players in right now, right? Like that's not where they're at in their rebuild. There's a lot going on Twitter of apparently Colorado and Colorado State getting chippy already. I'm sure it's surprising to all Nebraska fans who saw Colorado last week get offended at apparently everything that they got offended again with Colorado State. So we'll keep an eye on that one. We may have some chippiness going before that whole thing is over. But
what even is the score of that game?
So I think we're at 7-7 is the last update I've seen.
14-7 Colorado State. Scoop and score was the last one.
Okay. I know they've already. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I just saw the scoop and score on Twitter. I know Shedeur Sanders has already thrown an interception as well. So Colorado State may be a little bit more game than Colorado was expecting. It's possible they maybe focused too much on what was happening at midfield before the game.
They're focused on the sunglasses that they were given the other day.
Yeah, you're not supposed to talk to people with their sunglasses on. You have to remember that. Really,
or your hat.
This is the post game spread. We're coming to you live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill after every Nebraska game this season. And Jedediah mentions on Twitter, last time Nebraska did that, the QB transferred to Rice and then became a wide receiver, referring to that Luke McCaffrey situation with Adrian Martinez that I mentioned. Again, Luke McCaffrey was never actually a quarterback. Like, I want to make that very clear. He was recruited as an athlete. You can go check the recruiting boards. He was recruited as an athlete. The only reason he came to Nebraska is because no one wanted him else as a quarterback. Like, no one else was even going to look at him as a quarterback. Like, so that's not exactly a one-to-one comparison here. I get Heinrich Haarberg has taken snaps at other positions this year, but he came in as a quarterback. Jeff Sims is a quarterback. Luke McCaffrey, like, just look at the last name. None of those guys are quarterbacks. I do think the one played quarterback he tried to play quarterback in Michigan. I don't think he actually ever played that much. But other thoughts from today's game? I know we mentioned the defense. We mentioned the quarterback position a lot. Anything else that stuck out to you in terms of as you're watching it? And it's kind of hard live sometimes, right? Because you don't get the chance to like rewatch and process and things like that. But as you're sitting there watching, anything else that really jumped out to you?
I think just you could see it's on the sidelines, after big plays, there was just a lot more life in this team. Now they have life. They've never backed down at all.
Yeah.
But, they finally, they got that win under their belt now, and that builds a lot of confidence coming now into the rest of the season. Because, your season doesn't start until after you win.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, the season is, thankfully, this didn't go the way that Scott Frost's first season went, right? You have a couple go the wrong way early. You have a quarterback get injured early, and you end up, it kind of snowballs on you, right? Coach Rhule and staff got off the schneid much faster, which is a positive. And you hope they can build momentum from this, right? Some of the things that we mentioned that I think are portable and translatable to better teams and further down the road. Obviously, the defense we're super high on. I think having options at quarterback is a positive. I think the run game is starting to come into form. They've been pretty consistent there, even though it doesn't always look the way we want it to. You know, I think people get a little frustrated, especially with Gabe Ervin, right? His style isn't always the sexiest thing in the world. It's a little, it's a little 3 yards in a cloud of dust for too much for people's taste, right?
Yeah.
But it's been effective. They've gone about 40 carries for 200 yards or more every game so far this year. That's a positive. And if they can continue to do that, they're going to win a bunch of games. Is probably too aggressive, but enough to go to a bowl game, I think, right? And Fedoni getting going a little bit. That's a big positive that I think they can take throughout the season. They're starting to build a little bit. The momentum in terms of the individual pieces, I think, is starting to get there.
Yeah, their chess pieces are getting lined up right now. And that's why, you had to give them time. It's a rebuild.
And there's going to be times this year where it still looks ugly.
Yeah, it's not going to look good every game.
That's the nature of a rebuild, right?
It's just the nature of football.
That's true, yeah.
It's just the nature of how things go. And you have to, we're trusting Matt Rhule, and, rebuild don't happen overnight. So everyone needs to remember, it's game by game. It's not, you take every game, you learn something, you move on. Today they learned a lot, and they can take it to the next game, so on and so forth.
Well, and they not only did they learn a lot about themselves, but they also got a win in the process. Like, that's really important for the sustainability of the growth, right? Whether it's not moral victories, but whether it's victories in things that you've set out as a team as smaller goals, or whether it's the larger victories that you get in games, you have to start stacking up wins one way or another in order to keep people engaged, to keep people bought into the process, which obviously they've been able to do, right? After a tough 0-2 start, they were able to keep guys focused on, hey, we're just trying to go 1-0 this week, right? That's a big thing we heard Rhule say a bunch this week. We're just trying to go 1-0 against Northern Illinois. And next week, I'm sure it's going to be, hey, we're just trying to go 1-0 against Louisiana Tech. We're just trying to go 1-0 this week, right? And when you do that, it makes it much easier to focus on incremental progress. And that's what Nebraska needs right now. They need incremental progress. They need a lot of incremental progress, but it's not all going to happen like this. This wasn't set up to be a Colorado type rebuild, right? This wasn't
set up where, hey, you're going to come here because my name is Deion Sanders and I'm going to get all you just transfer here.
It was never going to be that. And I know it puts it in a really, I know the contrast is really hard not to just look at it and be like, well, if Deion can do it, why can't we do it? Well, guess what? Most people can't do it the way Deion's doing it, right? And I would even venture to guess after this group of people graduate or move on for him, I'm not sure Deion can replicate this even, because how many 5-stars are you going to have just ready-made to come with you the way you do a Travis Hunter? How many times is your kid going to be a really good quarterback that you can just pick up and take with you to the next program? Like, I mean, I know Coach McDermott did it over at Creighton with with Dougie, but like, this is a really unique situation for Colorado that is kind of a lightning in a bottle deal here. And listen, I don't know what the rest of the season even looks like for them, right? Maybe they start 2-0 and maybe things go squirrely down the road. I mean, right now they're 14-14 with Colorado State in a game that they were favored, I think, by 24 points, something like that.
I think the line went up after the sunglasses comment.
Yeah, it was an aggressive line against Colorado State. Listen, Colorado State's 0-1. Like, Colorado's ranked. Colorado State hasn't won a game yet. It should have been a big line, right? But you have no idea what the rest of the season looks like for Colorado. So, I mean, we could be talking about that Colorado game 2 months from now and being like, oh man, isn't it weird that kind of flipped the seasons for both teams? We don't know, right? We don't know what the rest of Nebraska season looks like. We don't know what the rest of Colorado State's season looks, or Colorado season looks like, or Colorado State's for that matter. But there's a temptation to make a comparison between the two programs, especially since they played so early on. And I have to just encourage you not to do that. They are taking two completely different styles to the rebuilds, and it's going to look a heck of a lot different. It just is. And Nebraska fans need to be okay with that. Matt Rhule's not going anywhere.
No, he's said that multiple times. Like, I want to raise my family here.
I mean, not just that. Even if you wanted to get rid of him, he's got an enormous contract. He's not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Like, you're gonna get, I would guess, a minimum of 4 years out of Matt Rhule, unless it just gets so good that the NFL wants him back. And even then, I don't know that he'd go. I think he kind of realized, yeah, college is for me, right? But if it got to that point where Nebraska was that successful that you even have to worry about that, that's a terrific problem to have.
That's an amazing problem. That's a win.
Yeah, absolutely it is. You would take that 8 days of the week, right? So don't focus on, oh, well, Deion's doing it so much faster and they came in and they beat the defending or the national runner-up from the year before. Like, listen, TCU is going to be happy to make a bowl this year, first and foremost, right? Like, that's not a great football team. And maybe Nebraska's not a great football team yet either this year, but they're going to get better. And I'm confident in that for Nebraska and for Matt Rhule. Couple of comments on the StreamYard on YouTube. People giving us some updates on the Colorado State game. We appreciate that. Jock is saying it is getting awfully chippy out there already. Travis Hunter apparently got knocked down pretty hard. I think he was the guy that fumbled on the scoop and score for Colorado State. Chase wants to know how many players rotated in on the O-line. I think 7.
I think so.
We saw Prohaska in there at one point. I know Henry Lutovsky was in there at one point as well. I haven't seen the participation chart yet, Chase, but I know at least 7 because I saw those guys in there for sure. So that's about the number Matt Rhule said it was going to be. He said if they had 7 guys that they felt good about, they'd be okay there. The Teddy Prohaska thing is interesting, right? Because it seems like he's getting healthier and in better shape. I think it's a conditioning thing at this point, is because I think they said he's full go in terms of health and everything like that. You wonder when you start to see more of him instead of just situationally, because I think he helps slide people into places where they're a little bit more comfortable. I think if you can start Teddy P at left tackle, you can move Corcoran in to left guard, which puts Piper as a rotation player instead of a full-time player. And Piper has struggled at times this year, and Corcoran is not a natural left tackle, right? So I would hope that we're getting closer since we're seeing him on the field, and that could not fix the O-line because, listen, they're running for 200 yards a game and 4 or 5 yards a carry for the season. They're doing part of their job really well, right?
Yeah. Or
at least well enough. There's some pass pro that leaves some things to be desired there, but I really feel like if Teddy P can be healthy and be even close to what we saw early in his career before he started getting injured, that could really help out the entire situation by moving guys into places where they're more comfortable and roles where maybe they're a little bit better suited. That could be really big for Nebraska. And Lutovsky and Piper then provide a nice amount of depth on that line. You're still at that 7 guys, but you have a guy in there in Piper that you feel as one of the 6th or 7th guys that has gotten starts for you, has played a ton of football, and you feel somewhat comforted in that depth there. So, Chase, I believe it was 7, but we'll check at least through the first, until they put backups in, it was 7. I don't know at the end of the game if they threw in some more guys to get reps or not. We'll have to check the participation chart either tomorrow or Monday, whenever they put it out. But in the main part of the game, I think it was the 7 guys. They're rotating a lot of guys in on the D-line too. We saw a lot of, obviously Cam Lenhart has come on really strong. We saw Blaze Gunnerson in there at the end, or no, at the end, not at the end. Blaze Gunnerson was in there. We saw Garrett Snodgrass in there at the end. Obviously Hutchmacher and Ty Robinson are both playing as well. I think we saw Prince Will in there today also. It's a little bit trickier to see on the defensive line because sometimes the linebackers are acting like D linemen. Guys like MJ Sherman line up as a linebacker, kind of act like D linemen. With the 3-3-5, it's not as clean as it is on the offensive line or in other lineups. But they said they want to rotate a lot of linemen in, and to their credit, they're doing that, and they're keeping. I mean, I think that's part of what's been so effective on the defensive side of the ball is they are keeping those guys pretty fresh.
Yeah, I agree. That's what they wanted to do. Like they said, I think that's what we're taking away today.
Yeah,
Nebraska has a lot of players that can do a lot of things, and they're able to rotate a lot of people out. I think that's something that you can look forward to in this season.
Well, yeah, that and the coaching staff has done what they said they're going to do. Like, that's the other takeaway is they've done the things they told you they were going to do. And there's comfort in that, right? If you're a fan, and I sometimes wonder, because we're coming off of the situation with the last head coach where it didn't feel like they were always doing what they said they were going to do. It seems like for the most part, this coaching staff has done that. And I think they've found, whether it's at quarterback, like we saw today, whether it's at defensive line or offensive line, they found guys that they feel comfortable working in there. And again, I think the takeaway today is the more good football players you have, the better, right? This is not rocket science, but Nebraska's in that point where they're just trying to accumulate and develop good football players. Brandon, anything else before we let you go for the day?
I don't think I got anything else. I think I'm good. I'm going home on a Husker victory.
All right. Jock on the YouTube says real quick, let's be honest, Sims is Rhule's guy, but how do you stay with him when you compare gameplay? Haarberg brought energy and toughness. We've seen what happens when coaches stay with their guys. Listen, I don't think Rhule is married to Sims. I think he saw a guy that he liked the talent of, he thought he could develop and win with. But at the end of the day, we have no idea when Jeff Sims is going to be healthy again. And B, I genuinely believe Matt Rhule will put out there whoever gives him the best chance to win.
That's him as a coach. He's not doing it because, that's my guy. He's going out there. I don't care. He's doing it for the better of the team.
Yes. And I don't think he's going to get attached to one guy just because he's his guy. If they put Sims back out there and he's not performing, I think you're going to see Haarberg again. I do. If he's making the errors that are preventable and that he kind of made in the first 2 weeks, I think you'll see Haarberg again. I don't think it's an Adrian Martinez situation. I don't think it's a Taylor Martinez situation where they were just so laser focused on their guy that they couldn't move past it. I don't think it's going to be like that, especially now that we've seen Heinrich Haarberg perform in real games. Also, real quick before we let you go, it is a big difference playing 2 Power 5 teams versus a Group of 5 team. It just is. We have to view Haarberg's performance through that lens as we're talking about the 2 quarterbacks. That's Brandon Tiedemann. We appreciate you joining us. We will be here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill after every Nebraska game. You can come join us. I'm also here every morning with Damon Benning, 7 to 10 a.m. on the Damon Benning Show with Ravi Lulla. Make sure you tune in on AM 590 or ESPN Tri-Cities. And every Friday before Husker home games, you can come out and join us for the Breakfast Blitz. Get a little breakfast here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Hear Damon and I talk about the upcoming Husker game. It's a great time. We had a really good time with everybody that came out yesterday. So make sure you come out and do that. And you can also listen to Damon and I on the Dish and Ish podcast. You're doing a podcast too as well, right?
Yep, I'm doing the God Bless Fantasy Football podcast. Me and Andrew Rogers doing that. Just give you guys some waiver wire picks and projections each week. Something a little different. So
there you go. You've got fantasy football there. You can listen to me and Damon, all those places I told you. Make sure you check out everything we're doing over here at Hurrdat Sports. Great content, something for everybody. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Talk to you guys later.